Hello everyone. Welcome to this online English learning program. I am Darshan Sharma and today we are going to talk about this story After 20 Years by O. Henry. It's chapter number 1 in 12th class English book. So today's program is for 12th class students studying in JK Board of School Education schools. Let's get started with this story. But before we actually start, we'll just have a look at your whole syllabus. Your syllabus of English has been divided into 4 sections: reading comprehension, writing skills, literature and grammar. So from your textbook there will be questions in your examination on reading comprehension, on literature. So today's chapter will cover primarily these 2 sections and also the writing part, because everything that you write in your exams will be written. Except grammar, everything has to be written by yourself from your side. So in everything that you do, your writing will also be tested, will also be evaluated. So remember, writing is there in everything. So that's where we'll start our today's chapter. But before we start, let's have a look at the cover page of your English textbook, which looks like this. One reason why I wanted to show you this cover page is that I want you to read every bit of your textbook, right from your cover page to back page, through the stories, poems and other prose things, because it's not always that only the prescribed material in your textbook will teach you new things. This textbook is meant to teach you English, and English is a language, and you can learn new vocabulary words everywhere and anywhere, not only in your textbooks but in your surroundings, on the signboards, like new words you are getting these days through the internet, from TV. So this is the cover page of your textbook, and you should know the title of the book is Chinar Second, and there is a subtitle, an anthology of prose and poems for class 12. If you still don't know the meaning of anthology, this word, please look it up in the dictionary and discuss with your friends. The same subtitle was there in your 11th class as well. But if you still don't know the meaning of the word anthology, that means you need to read better. So let's move on. Today's story is after 20 years, as I already told you, and there are a few key points to remember whatever you are reading in English, and in whatever class. These points will remain the same. You should always remember while you are reading a text, while you are reading a book, whether you are reading the book for fun, or is it an academic book, or anything else that you are reading. It's a newspaper or a magazine. This is true for all kinds of reading materials that you are reading. Point number 1 is the textbook is meant for your reading, not as something your teachers will read and explain to you. So don't expect that you will read your textbook only when you go to the classroom. Don't expect me to read your whole textbook, the whole chapter in front of you, and then explain each and every word. That is a wrong way of doing it. Remember, it's your reading material. It's meant for your reading. It's meant for your enjoyment, for your pleasure. So please find some time to read these texts. And point number 2 is, it's not important to understand the meaning of each and every word in a text. So if you think the text is too difficult for you, there is no reason to get discouraged, because nobody expects you to understand each and every word in a text. It's not important. Especially when you are giving the first reading, the text, it should be for your pleasure, for enjoying it, and for its general understanding, for the theme, for the gist. So don't be discouraged if you don't understand each and every word in a text. This is not what the text is supposed to be read like. You can do the in-depth analysis later on, of course, if it is required or needed for your examination or for anything. Then if the point, the second last point is very important, because it talks about how to deal with new words that you find during your reading of the text. So you must look up the new words in dictionary, but not while you are reading the text. So if you think there is a new word in your story or whatever you are reading, should not stop it there and open the dictionary and look up the word in the dictionary. You have to take the help of context clues to understand what a new word means. And context clues means what is written before the text, what is written after the text. They will give you some help to understand what that new word means. So these are a few things that you should remember before you try reading any text. So of course, because this is a story and we'll be reading it right now, let's a little bit about this author who has written this story. Do you remember this man, O. Henry? Do you think you have heard this name before? If you have passed your ninth class from the state board itself, you must have read the story The Last Leaf. Yes, the same Last Leaf. You remember that artist, the famous painter Behrman? Yes, that story was also written by O. Henry, the famous American short story writer. His real name was William Sidney Porter, so O. Henry was his pen name. And O. Henry's stories are known for their witticism. A lot of wit is there in his stories. Clever wordplay and unexpected twist endings. If you remember the story from your ninth class, that is The Last Leaf, you remember how unexpectedly it ended. And we should expect the same from this story as well. So the setting of the story, this story after 20 years is set in New York. And this is an extract from the story itself, where one of the characters, Bob, is talking to the policeman about his best friend, his best chum, Jimmy Wells, and himself. And he says, he and I were raised here in New York, just like two brothers together. Raised here in New York. That means the place where they are standing is in New York. They were raised in New York. So the story is set in New York. The story starts in New York. It ends in New York in the same street. So this is where the story is set. New York, as you all know, is a big city in the USA. Then some characters. Let's talk about the characters of this story. There are two main characters in the story, the two friends, Jimmy Wells and Silky Bob, or just the Bob. Let us read the opening lines of the story. The story opens with a description of Jimmy Wells. Jimmy Wells is the policeman of the story. The policeman on the beat moved up the avenue impressively. The impressiveness was habitual and not for show, for spectators were few. The time was barely 10 o'clock at night, but chilly gusts of wind with the taste of rain in them had well nigh de-peopled the streets. Trying doors as he went, twirling his club with many intricate and artful movements, turning now and then to cast his watchful eye down the Pacific thoroughfare, the officer, with his stalwart form and slight swagger, made a fine picture of the guardian of the peace. So these are the opening lines of the story where Jimmy Wells is being described. So we know a few things about this character from these opening lines. He's a policeman. He is very impressive. He walks very impressively as if a man of authority. And he makes some artful movements with the club that he's holding in his hand. A small stick you must have seen that policemen often carry. And he is a guardian of the peace. He walks, he has got a stalwart form, his physical appearance, he's a very solid looking man, and walks with a very impressive way, in a very impressive way. Jimmy Wells, we will know later on, was one of the two friends, and he was a very dutiful person. he gave priority to his duty over his friendship. So these are a few things that we know about Jimmy Wells. The other character is Silky Bob, and we have taken some lines from the text in order to know what kind of a man he was. This is how this man is introduced in the story. In the doorway of a darkened hardware store, a man leaned with an unlighted cigar in his mouth. So this is how he's introduced. This is how the reader comes across Bob. He stood in the doorway of a darkened hardware store on a chilly winter night. And then later on, there is another description of this man. The man in the doorway struck a match and lit his cigar. Now this is his appearance now. A pale, square-jawed face with keen eyes, and a little white scar near his right eyebrow. Look at his scarf pin was a large diamond, oddly set. That means this man seems to be rich. Bob is rich in this story because his scarf pin is a large diamond. Now this is what he says later in the story. I came 1,000 miles to stand in this door tonight, and it's worth it if my old partner turns up. That means Bob is a very loyal friend. He came 1,000 miles. Any idea how many kilometers 1,000 miles would become? Yes, it's about 1,600 kilometers. So he traveled 1,000 miles to meet his friend, to keep his promise that he made with his friend 20 years ago, and he thinks it would be worth it if his old partner turned up. That means he is a loyal friend. He has traveled a lot to meet him, and this is one of his characteristics. And then another example of his richness. The waiting man pulled out a handsome watch, the lids of it set with small diamonds. So this shows that he was a rich man. Along with these two characters, there is another character in the story who was Jimmy Wells' colleagues, the man in the long overcoat who actually arrests Silky Bob in the end. Now let's look at the summary of the story. But remember one thing again. If you are watching this video, make sure you read that story yourself, and read that story once or twice. After that, you can look up the difficult words in the new words in the dictionary, and then you can watch this telecast again. This video will be there on YouTube for you to consult again and again. But remember to read the story yourself. This summary is just a very, very brief one, and this doesn't give you any enjoyment, any pleasure of reading, but just for the sake of getting the gist of the story, we have summarized these points here. So as has been discussed, this story is about two friends, Jimmy and Bob, and their unusual promise. And what was that unusual promise? They promised to meet each other after 20 years. 20 is a long time. Sometimes, friends make promises to meet the next day, or maybe after a week, or after a month, but 20 years is a very long time for the friends to be away from each other and then finally meet. So as expected, things change a lot during 20 years. It happens all the time. It happens in this story, things change a lot. And what are those changes that happen? Bob becomes a criminal and Jimmy becomes a policeman. Sorry, there is a spelling error here. I should have written policeman and not policeman. And then at the appointed date and time, the two friends meet, but that meeting is not as expected. There is something you remember those unexpected twist endings that O. Henry usually does in his stories. So the two meet, but before Jimmy could actually reveal his identity to his friend, he recognizes his friend to be a wanted criminal. See, the friend is a criminal, the other friend is a policeman, and then they two meet, and the policeman identifies before the criminal identifies him as a friend. So in the end, the policeman friend gets his criminal friend arrested by one of his colleagues in the police department. So this is how the story ends. Now let us have a few things to discuss in the story. I think this is more important. These will also form the questions in your examination at the end of your session, and more or less this kind of questions will be asked there. And this is what should be discussed about a story, about any story that you read. This is what should be thought about if you have nobody to discuss it with. The first thing is title of the story. So we have read the story. I expect you have read the story. And now think, do you think this title after 20 years is the right title for the story? How writers decide the titles for their stories? And does it happen all the time that the readers also like the title? Are they able to relate the title to the story? Do you think this title is appropriate? If you think it's appropriate, why do you think that? And if you think it's not appropriate, then again, why do you think that? I think this title is more or less appropriate because the story, the main action of the story happens after 20 years. You see, the story starts in that street in New York where a man is waiting in the darkened hardware store and a policeman is on his patrol duty. The two meet, and then one of them leaves the policeman, another policeman comes and arrests him. So the whole story happens here. But something important had happened 20 years before, a promise. And the whole action happens after 20 years from that promise. So that's why I think, because and of course if you look at the main theme in the story, it's about what is the effect of 20 years on a person's personality. It changes a good man into a bad one. It sometimes changes your appearance so that you don't identify each other, recognize each other. So this is how 20 years is the time that affects people, that turns good people into bad ones. Sometimes it changes your fortunes, sometimes it makes you rich, sometimes it makes you a different man than you are. So for these reasons, I think the title of the story is appropriate and apt. Now let's talk about the main themes in the story. Of course, one of the main themes is friendship. The story is about two friends who got separated, and you can't deny that one of the main themes in the story is friendship. How friends, like this criminal friend Bob, he comes 1,000 miles to meet his friend after 20 years. That's friendship. This is how friends behave. This is how true friends behave. I would call him a true friend. Even if he was a criminal, even if he was a bad man, he was a true friend. That's why he traveled to meet his friend. So one of the themes is friendship. Another theme, of course, is ambition. You see, it was Bob's ambition that took him to the West to try his fortune there. Whereas Jimmy was slightly less ambitious than Bob, so he stayed there in New York, became a policeman. Though he didn't become a really rich man like Bob, but he was more satisfied, and because sometimes ambition becomes uncontrolled, and it makes people do wrong things in life. So this is one of the themes, that we should not be driven by our uncontrolled ambition. Sometimes one has to be satisfied by what one gets in life. And another important theme is duty. So like we are on duty, we are government employees, so we have to think about our duty. Sometimes somebody in our family is sick. Sometimes we have important things to do in our office. We have to decide between the two sometimes. And this is not just because you are a government employee, so you have to do your duties. Even if you are a common man, you have your duties. For example, right now, it is your duty to stay at home. It is your duty to obey, to comply the rules of the government. What the government is saying, you have to stay home. And if we don't do that, that means we are not doing our duty. So one of the main themes is duty, of course. And our main hero of the story, Jimmy Wells, puts his duty above friendship. So gets his friend arrested by performing his duty honestly. One of the discussion points can be, what would you do if you were Jimmy? Would you also arrest your friend like this? I don't know. I don't know many Indians who would do the same. I don't know many Americans who would do the same if they had to arrest one of their. Yes, we do see this in films, but I don't know many true people in this. I mean, from the people I know who would do the same. What would you do? So think about it. I think yes, I would try to do the same that Jimmy Wells did. But if I were at his place, I would tell him that I was his friend Jimmy, and I would request him to come along with me, and I would ask him that I would that was the wrong way that he was going to that he was following, and he should you know, surrender himself. These were the things I would ask him, and I don't even know whether I would arrest him in the end or not, but I would not exactly do what Jimmy did. And why do you think Jimmy didn't arrest his friend himself? This is the purely what do you think kind of a question. I mean, I can't put my thinking into your head, so you think, why didn't he arrest his friend himself? So these were the few things in the story. I hope you reading is very important. I am again telling you this. So read this story again and then watch this video once again. I hope you will get benefited from this lecture. Thank you very much.